Okay. So what I want to go is to this show one tag. Oh, actually, so tags are something that I like to use in Git, since we are talking about Git. Tags can be an incredibly useful way for you to put a sort of bookmark in your revision history. For example, after a while, maybe you have a version that works well, and you can call it release 1 via a tag, and then you can go on working. Tags, unfortunately, don't get automatically uploaded usually to the server. So I need to do git push origin -- tags to push to the origin all the new tags that I have created locally. Okay, and this gives this show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which are the tags that I prepared preparing for this class, you know, as the most significant milestones in the development of the project that I'm doing. Okay, so so you can follow them here. There is show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what I'm doing here is a minor trick, but incredibly useful one. So let's see how the website works. Sorry. Let me reload it. Okay. Now I can do two things, and I want to show you how they are implemented. I can play music, okay, which right now tells me simply no music because I try to play it, but I don't have any play URL. You know, I want to do the upload later today. But I can upload music, I can play music, so select one of these files for playing, and I can delete a file, which actually works instantaneously. And I want to show you, we didn't do the delete last time, right? I don't think we did. So I want to show you how these are both implemented along with a trick. The trick is as follows. We know that this is generated by a list of items. Okay, and it's a very common case in laying out a web page where you have a list of objects, and then you lay out every object like here in a different div or as a row of a table, right? And then the crucial part is that we want to tie up the behavior of buttons, either the play button or the delete button, with some action in the JavaScript. Okay? So there are two ways of doing it. One way, which we used last time, is to use the ID of the object. If you take objects out of a database, every object has an ID, and so you can use that ID. What is the drawback? That if you tell me that the object has ID 25, then I have to loop through my list to find the object 25 that has ID 25. This is feasible, and it's what we did last time if you look at the code, but it feels really, how to say, ugly, right? Because, I mean, it's an array. You would wish that you can just go to the right element of the array because you know its index. So the idea is this. It requires a little bit of JavaScript and discipline, but it makes all the rest of the coding a lot more pleasant. Let me show you what I do. Sorry, this is the Python code. I wanted the JavaScript code. So let's look at the function, for example, to get the tracks, okay, or get more tracks. Whenever I do it, I call this enumerate function. This enumerate function essentially traverses the array that might have changed and adds one element to each object so that from the object you can know its index. The function enumerate is a function that maps a function E over all elements of the array. So do you know the idea of what it means to map a function over an array? It's a very common operation in functional programming. Mapping a function over an array means applying the function over all the elements of the array, obtaining a new array. Okay? So what I do here is that I'm mapping this function, and the function is anonymous. It's a function of a parameter E that is the object of the array. And what the function does is that it sets E._index is equal to k++. So k starts at 0. Let me do a sort of visual, okay, in this way of what this function does. It's a good exercise to see how to code in JavaScript. So imagine that this is my array. So sorry, actually, let me use better syntax. My array is done in this way. The array is done vertically, okay? So my array may have 4 elements, okay? Each one of these is an object that says, I don't know, title of the song is hello, no, and a bunch of other stuff, okay? So each one of these is an array, each one of these is an object, okay? I just say title to give you an example of one of the particular members of the object, okay? So this is my array. So if you will, there is at the beginning, you know, the open and the closed of the array, no? Something like this. So on an array of objects like that, I say, I set k to 0, and then I map this function. I don't do anything typically with a return value of enumerator. So I return it just because of the fun of it. But the effect is that I map on every element of the array this function that takes an object and says, object._index is equal to k plus plus. The effect of this is that since k is initially 0, you know, this will get index 0, and then the rest of the fields. Index 1, and then the rest of the fields, and so on and so forth, right? So it will be something like this. I don't do anything with a return object because the scope of this, the purpose of this function is not really to, I mean, I return it, but the real goal of doing this thing here is to perform this assignment on each element of the array of objects, okay? So the problem I'm trying to solve is a silly one in the end. If I have the index, it's easy to go to the object. I simply say my list with that index element, right? It's trivial. The problem is that I need to do the opposite, because when I render a row of the HTML, given the object, I need to know the index if I want to be able to tell the JavaScript, hey, delete the third entry in the list, right? And so this index will give me the converse correspondence. The only thing that you have to do is that you have to take care that whenever you modify the list in JavaScript, you have to call this enumerate method once more. So whenever you get more data, or whenever you delete data, you unfortunately have to update this index for all the objects, okay? It's kind of a boring thing. You have to decide essentially which one to be your pain, right? You have to decide whether your pain is going to be that you are told the object ID and then you have to search it in all the IDs, or you have to decide whether your alternative pain is that you know, whenever you modify the list, you need to reindex the list. Okay, one of the two you have to have. And I usually found in my code that this way is preferable. So I just will be disciplined in calling enumerate all the time. Okay, so with this small change, the buttons are implemented as follows. Let's look at the delete button, for instance, first. Sorry, I have to go down. Okay, so this is the implementation of the delete button. It's a far trash icon, okay? And I have a v-on click delete track in which I give the track index, okay? Not the ID anymore, because now I have the indices, which will make my code a little bit more pleasant, okay? So notice this, I called this method. Here in my JavaScript, I need to define that method as one of the methods of Vue, of course, because otherwise Vue is not aware, does not know how to link what appears in the template to the actual implementation in JavaScript. And so I say that when delete track is called, that's the function to be run. This function, self-delete track, is spelled out here, okay? It's a function that gets as input the track index. And then I can say self variable track, so this will be the track I'm trying to delete, is equal to self vo tracks of track index. Okay, so the goal of enumerating them is that it makes much easier to find the retrieve, to find out what you're talking about. Okay, so now I have the object, and I need to do a couple of things. I need to say that it's not. So if by any chance this selected ID is because you know you could be playing one track or displaying one track. So this is stuff that wait. No, but I'm pointing at the wrong function. I want the delete code. I'm sorry. I was staring at the wrong piece of code. This is a delete track, okay? So in this case, I don't need to fish out the track actually. So, but what I do is this: I do a call to the server to a delete track URL, in which I pass it the track ID, okay, which is self-tracks track ID. So this is my track, of which I access the ID, and then when it succeeds, when I hear back from the server, I say. That you know, one of my biggest disagreements with the JavaScript is that it uses completely horrible names, in my personal opinion, for the functions to access arrays, and I constantly forget them. But so this splice statement essentially means remove this particular index and compact the list. You know, why is it called splice and has those parameters? I don't claim that I know, you know. Madness, I guess, but that's a traditional name. But so when I hear back from the server, I deleted the track also on the UI, and then I renumber all the tracks. So in a sense, this ensures some partial goodness. That is, when you click on the trash bin and the server is down, the track will not disappear. In fact, we could try that, right? That's pretty easy to try. Because I can simply stop here the server. Okay, so now the you know, this is done, so it won't reply anymore. And now if I try to delete one of these tracks, no. And so if you wonder why is my button not working, that's always a good question. So you can go to inspect the element. Okay. We can look at the network tab, okay, and we can look at the Ajax methods, for example, and we can see that when I click here, there is no return to this particular thing. Request headers, there is no reply headers, there is no response, okay, and the timing is that actually it's blocked. Okay, it's blocked because it cannot. The server is down, and so it rejects the request. Okay. Now, by the way, let me see if I can. You know, one should never try to. Okay, maybe I should try this another time. So yeah. But one thing you can do in the realm of things you can do when things go wrong is this. You can click on sources, you know, debugger and sources, and this is my source, right? This is my source code. So if you wonder why your button doesn't work, there is one more thing that you can possibly do. You can go to delete track, and here you can set a breakpoint. It's as easy as clicking on the line. A breakpoint means when the JavaScript execution will hit that line, it will stop. And you will be able to examine the state of stuff, okay? So let's try whether that's true, okay? I click on one of these garbage bins. I never used it on Firefox. I used to use it on Chrome, so it's a bit of a learning experience for me as well. Let's see what happens if I click on these. Oh yeah, but it works, you see? It blocked the execution exactly at that spot. and now it tells me both in the call stack what is going on, but also I can look at the various values. For example, I can look at the track index being 0, okay, and I can look at these, and I can look at app, the value of app, and I can also look at other values. Now, for example, I mean, I'm sorry, it's all a bit squished at the bottom. Let me see if I can access some more. But this object should have in the app object enumerate get ref URL self. So you should be able to fish out all the information from here. Actually, as I mentioned it to you, if you want to look up global variables, it may be easy to look at them from the console, accessing them via the classical, app.vu, etc. notation as we did last time, okay? But if you go into the debugger, this gives you also the value of things like track index, which is a non-local variable. And once you're in the debugger, you can step through and step into function calls, so you can really execute your code one step at a time, and in that way you can trace your various errors, okay? I mean, it is yet another thing that is important to know if you get into trouble. Sorry for this parenthesis, okay? So this is one thing you can do. We can remove the breakpoint now, and we can go back to our work. And the other thing that I did is that, we can play music. Wait. Oh, okay, you're right. The server is dead, I guess. Let me restart it. 1 second. I may be in a funny state here because, so let me reload the page. So it's taking a bit of time. Yeah, I don't know why the server is slow.
Is it paused in the debugger?
Oh, yeah, I seem to have inadvertently created another, yeah, thank you, another breakpoint just by fumbling with my mouse. Thank you very much, you spotted it. Yeah, whenever you click here, you created a breakpoint, and I created a breakpoint right at the end of my get tracks function, I think, get tracks URL, and so I was blocking the whole loading. Yeah, my fault, okay? So there is this button that instead, tries to make you play music. Now, if I add a track, I can say, I don't know, A, B, C. I can submit, and this, adds the track and doesn't clear here. So I can do a couple of things now. One is that I can teach you how to clear the error, which I probably should do, and is quite easy, okay? And the other thing that I want to do is, just as an example of a more sophisticated interaction, how would I do to confirm deletion? I mean, you may not be on top of your mind how to confirm deletion, but it's one of these things that is useful to know, because there are other times in which you do want to confirm the action of a button, whether it has been received to the server. So if you don't mind, let me do it for the deletion, and then you can apply it to something more useful in other things that you do, okay? So let me do a branch. So git checkout branch, let's say, like a JavaScript confirmation delete. Okay, so I can do my changes. So first of all, I want that when I add a track, I delete these fields. So that's quite easy. Let's go to the code that does the that adds a track. Okay, so you see I have a form artist, form track, and form album. And this is actually not used anymore, the duration, so I should be able to just remove it. The problem is that when the function call returns, I don't give any confirmation that that the data has been inserted. I mean, I don't delete the old information. So, and this is very easy to do. It's simply self vo form artist is equal to empty. Self vo form track is equal to empty. Self vo form album is equal to empty. Okay. Now, we could also do something else. For example, what about adding a confirmation to the fact that we are trying to insert a track? Okay. How would this look like? Let's look at it a moment. Then we do it also for the delete button. But you see that once I have a track, so I have this submit. How would you like me to do it? I mean, I can easily add a spinner. One of these things that says work is going on. One way that I would do is I would put a spinner to the right of the submit button that would sort of make it evident that the submit button is working. Is this sort of low-level way okay with you? Let's try, okay? So, unfortunately, doing something like this requires a bit of bookkeeping, because the first thing that I do is adding the spinner. So, where is the submit button? Okay, this input here is the submit button, okay, which is closed there. Okay, so here you can see it better, okay. So right after it, in the same div, I can start to put an I of class is equal to fa, okay. And now let me look the documentation up, because I don't remember it on the fly, but font awesome. And unfortunately, they changed the format of the documentation. I think it's in the how to use now, what I want. They teach you how to make icons bigger, smaller, and also you see fast spinner makes it so fast spinner is the icon, and fa pulse makes it pulse. So this effect in total is what I will want. Okay, so you can look here for documentation. Okay, so we can just grab this icon, which is the one I prefer. Okay, you can use any of the other ones if you wish. And so here we can put these. Now, if I do this, I can reload the page just to check that I like it. Okay. What? Why? This is the way I used to do it. Let me check a moment. Okay, so this difference between FA and FAS is simply that I'm running, and I gave you a slightly older version of Font Awesome than the one they documented now, and I think they made an incompatible change. Okay, so I would need to update the icons. With my older icons, I need to simply say FA instead of FAS. Luckily, I remembered. Okay, so now we have this button here. And the other thing that, so, you know, the way you typically build a web page is, again, you put all the material there, and then you use a conditional display to decide what to show. So now I have to invent a VIF rule to decide when the submit button has to have this thing spinning, which is kind of boring if you think of it, right? But I don't see a way around it. So what I'm gonna do is something like this. I need to invent a new variable. It's very heavyweight, if you will, for such a small thing, but there is no other way. I have to call it, sorry, let me add it to the proper place. It's one of these variables that are known to Vue, and I can call it something like add pending, okay, and I initialize it to false. Okay. Now, once I have this variable add pending, here I have to say that this particular tag is displayed only if add pending is true. So vo if is equal to add pending. Okay, so this causes the conditional display. And now I have to add a couple of rules to toggle this variable on and off. Luckily, this is boring but not particularly difficult. In fact, quite easy. Here, like I can say self vo add pending is equal to true, like show spinner. And once I get the reply back, I zero the form, and also I say self vo add pending is equal to false. Okay, so it's a tiny bit boring, but it does the job. Let us see whether this works. Now I can add the track. It doesn't display anything. I can say E, F, G. When I press these, oh, okay. So the problem is when I press these, it will be too fast, right? So how do you test these things? So you go to the JavaScript code in api.py, and in add track, import OS, okay, which is a Python module, and here I can say OS sleep. Does it exist, OS sleep? Oh, no, it's called time sleep of 1. So this sleeps 1 second. And I need to import time instead of OS. I'm sorry. Okay, so this sleep, I believe the sleep is in seconds, is not milliseconds. So it should work. It should kind of work. Let's try. So now I submit. And I see this for 1 second until I get the answer, okay? And once I'm happy that it works, I can comment it so that, it won't annoy me anymore, but I can always use it. I mean, I just don't want to delete it so that you can see it. So git commit am confirmation for additions. Okay, this is good and great. The problem is this. The problem is that now I want a confirmation for the delete button. And as you may understand, I can't really afford to have one global variable, right? Or perhaps I could. Okay, so let me try. There are two approaches. We can choose whichever we want. One approach would be to have a global variable, which is the index of the variable we have of the track we are deleting. Okay, and then we show the spinner if that index is equal to the particular row we are displaying in the table. Okay, this is approach number 1, let's call it. What is the pro and cons of approach number 1? The pro is that I need only one variable. The cons, however, is that it's not entirely clear how this will behave, and I think it won't behave well if I click on 2 garbage bins one after the other, right? Because remember how JavaScript is asynchronous. If I click on 2 garbage bins, the 2 calls will go out to the server, right? But then if I have only one variable, this will be able to show only one spinner. So no, let's ditch this approach. It's not good enough for us. So what I want to do rather is add to each object a variable that tells us whether the spinner is going to be spinning or not. Now the problem is this: the server is not polite enough to give us a list of objects with this field already present. Okay? And this is kind of annoying. Yeah, but I think it's fine because, yeah, I don't see it very much, but fine. So what I want to do is, though, let me think. Let me think a moment. So, okay, let me think at, loudly, because, so there are various solutions. So the cleanest one would be to go to the server and then ensure that the server sends a list of songs that already has this variable set in the proper way to false at the beginning, because you're not deleting any of them. This would guarantee that on the client, on the web interface, as soon as you have this array, every element of the array has the field and you don't have to worry about anything. This is by far my recommended approach if you can do it, okay? Now I will do this in this class because it's by far the best. However, I'm thinking, suppose you have to do with a nasty server that doesn't give you that. And what I'm wondering is this. We have an enumerate function that I'm guaranteed to call each time I modify my list. Could I give to the enumerate function the job of adding this particular element? And I think I could, right? So I think that one possible solution would be to take this enumerate function here and here, right, in the place where I'm really writing what the function does for each element, I could add a line that says something like e dot deletion pending is equal to false. Okay. The only problem with doing this, which I think would work, is that then I need to check that I call enumerate in the right places. Let me see. When I call delete track, yeah, actually it would kind of work. It would kind of work. Let me do it this way. Because you see, when I delete, I call it only at the end, and so it will reset all the deletions to false. No, okay, instead it would, I'm wrong. It would be a stupid idea. Let me tell you why it would be a stupid idea in the end. Can anybody see the reason why I cannot simply do it this way? Yes?
Because you're going to wipe out all the other spinners and not just the one that you want.
Perfect, yes, that's the reason. So I should have to write more sophisticated code that says, if the delete field is null and is not simply false, and you know, then you have the fun in JavaScript to have to distinguish between null and false, which is maybe not the best exercise in the world. So let me not do it in this way, really, okay? And let me go back here. Not do it in this way, and instead let me set it up server side, which is much easier to deal with. Okay, I go into the API. You see here I'm already assigning some variables, and so I can say deletion pending is equal to false, and this will just ensure that every record I have has that particular field. And I get tracks always via a single method, so this should just work, okay? So once I have deletion pending done in this way for a particular track, I can go in index.js and write it in the deletion method. I can do this: self v tracks of track index dot deletion pending is equal to true, okay? And then once I get these, I simply say, well, I don't need to say anything, right? I was wondering what to say and to switch off the spinner, but because I do this splice call, the splice call will remove the track entirely from the array, so you know there is nothing left to modify. I mean, the track disappears after the spinner disappears, so there is nothing for me to do especially. Okay, now I just have to cause the conditional display of the spinner, and that is done exactly in the same way as before. So I might as well copy this tag. Okay, and I put it here. Where is my trash can? Here, okay. So this is the icon for the trash can. Okay, and let me just format it this way to make it clearer. And in the same place, I added the icon for the spinner, and the condition now becomes that my track, which is the object on which I iterate, has deletion pending. Okay, and that should do it. Let's see whether this works. So now, you know, I need to reload to have the new JavaScript. I hope I haven't made any mistake. But if I delete a track, oh, okay, let me play the same trick of adding a 1 second delay in the server, because otherwise, you know, we don't see it. Okay, so if I do the deletion now, okay, and so the only ugly thing is that all the tracks shift. And in order to prevent that, what we would have to do is assign a fixed width of this last column into the CSS, so that even when I display 2 icons and not one, you know, the thing doesn't change width. But that's a detail that you can take care of later. Okay, so that's a principle for, you know, confirming that the operation has happened. Okay, so you see the idea is always the same. You set something at the beginning and then you give the confirmation at the end of the call. Now let me do a checkpoint here. Actually, okay, I don't think I can do. Actually, let me do it in the visual way so that I also remember what I'm doing. Okay, so. No, sorry, I want to show you another small detail. So let's look a moment at how this request to delete a track works. Here I use a post method to the del track URL, in which I give a parameter called track ID that contains the track. What I want to just look at is this delete track URL. Where is this defined? This delete track URL is defined here. And as you can see, it's assigned URL. Okay? And I just want to remind you of this, and that in the server method, we first check that there is a signature. That will tell you essentially a couple of things. That the user is signed in, and that it's indeed a non-forged URL which is causing this post method to try to delete one track. Okay, so this is to eliminate these cross-site attacks. Okay, and otherwise the processing in the database is fairly simple. I simply look up the track that has that particular track ID and I delete it. Okay, and I sleep for one and then I return. Okay, so just to clarify how the server method is written there. Now, questions on this point? Otherwise, I want to explain you how to upload files, which is unfortunately another pair of sleeves entirely, as so to say. Okay, so how do we upload files? Well, it's one of these silly things that you believe that it ought to be very simple, and somehow it's not. So there are two ways to upload files. One is the sort of form-based way. If you want to delete to upload a file based on forms, then you can. My advice would be to build an SQL form using the SQL form helper in Web2Py, and give a field that has as type file. Let me just show you what the documentation for this is. And this creates a sort of old-fashioned upload, like the one you are using in CodeGrader, in which first you can select a file via a button, and then when you click the submit button, you know, this uploads the file. So this is the old-fashioned way, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it in this particular lecture. I can cover it later if you like, but if you want to know, you go to Web2Py Forms book, and you look at the chapter on forms. This contains part of the explanation, and the other part is so Web2Py database book. Okay, let me actually start from here. So I'm sorry, I need to find it. Field types, okay? There are many field types. This is the type of what you can put into a field. And this in Web2Py also helps dictate the type of form that Web2Py automatically creates for you. You see that some types are simple: string, text, boolean, integer, double, yada yada, right? But one of these particular types is called upload. And if you create a field of type upload, then there is a complicated system in Web2Py, not complicated, it's actually simple to use, so that when somebody submits the file, you receive a form in which you can access easily the content of the file that was submitted, and the file itself is saved in that database field. Okay, so it all happens very automatically in Web2Py. And is very beautiful, but it's unfortunately not what we want to do now. What we want to do now is upload files via JavaScript and via Vue, okay? And this is a harder thing to do. It's a harder thing to do because we have to do it manually ourselves, okay? There are two ways of doing it. One would be the poor man's way of writing the code from scratch, in which you essentially ask for a selector, get the file, you package it in the right way, and you send it to the server. And I could show you that, but instead I want to show you another thing. Uploading files, especially if you want to upload more than one, is a complicated operation in truth. Okay, I mean, it's simple conceptually, but complicated in practice. Why? Suppose I want to enable you to upload a file. It's an operation that takes time, and I may want to show you a progress bar of how much you have uploaded if I want to do it well. Once it's uploaded, I may want to offer you a button that tells you, delete it perhaps, or, replace it by something else. Moreover, suppose that you now want to upload 50 files because you're backing up your photo directory to the web to share it with someone, say, right? Then 50 photographs take some time to upload. Maybe it's not a super bright idea if I have a network to try to upload 50 images at once. I don't know, it depends. I wonder how many of you have taken networking classes and know how TCP/IP and backoff works. But it may be better use of the bandwidth you actually have to try to upload at most a couple of files at the same time. And once you're done with these two files, to try to upload the third, then, but only keep 2 or 3 or a small number of active uploads at the same time. Do you know the reasons for that? If not, you should really take some networking class. But the reasons are essentially something like this. So why would you ever want to upload more than one file? Because if you look in how the networking protocols are done, the amount of bandwidth you can use in a single connection is a function of two things, of the packet loss, but also of the round-trip time. If you're talking to a faraway server, if the round-trip time is long, it will take some time for the bandwidth you're using to ramp up to the maximum bandwidth of the link, right? And so, if you have a long round-trip time, it's more convenient to you to actually start multiple connections so that you can start filling, the general network connections you have with more stuff being uploaded. However, if you have too many connections, so if you try to upload all 50 photos at once, so then you are bitten by another phenomenon, right? If you have too many connections at once over the same network link, and you are trying to saturate them all, then, because you try to saturate them all, you will have packet loss. And packet loss in TCP/IP causes these linear increase and geometric decrease. This means essentially that every time in a time window the packets make it through, you increase the number of packets that you can send every time unit by 1. So you linearly increase how much you use the bandwidth, right? But whenever there is packet loss, you geometrically decrease your bandwidth utilization. So it means that if TCP/IP in a sense is too polite, if too many packets try to get in and someone is bumped off, then what it does is it halves the connection of that. So if you have packet loss due to these interfering connections of yourself, then you are not using your bandwidth efficiently. So all these considerations point to the fact that if you want to upload a bunch of stuff, you need to upload maybe more than one, but not more than a few at a time. So in fact, if you look at people that do it, with some thought, like Google Drive or Dropbox, these uploading methods, if you have ever noticed, they try to upload 2 or 3 things at once, and they use a sort of, heuristic for deciding how many of them at once they should be uploading, right? So the point is this. Suppose you want to try to actually upload files with all these goodies. How would you do it? It's a complicated problem. And so whenever you fall into a complicated problem and you're developing in JavaScript, one of the thoughts you're having should be, somebody else must have thought of this. And once you do that, what you should do is a search for a JavaScript plugin that actually solves your problem. So what I'm going to show to you now is two things: how to upload files using a plugin, but also how to use JavaScript plugins in coordination with your Vue code. I show it here for an uploader, but there are plugins for many other functions. I don't know which ones I will get to use in the class. One will be, for example, to implement Stripe payments. That I will use for sure. Another one that I recommend is if you ever have to draw a calendar and place events on the calendar, there is a plugin. There are several plugins. One I have used in the past is called calendar.io or fullcalendar.io, maybe fullcalendar.io. You can Google it. And so, you know, in general, it's always worth looking for these plugins. There are many plugins to display graphs, to do this, to do that. So now we will look at the one for uploading files in detail. So let me go to the place where I did it. Wait a moment. Sorry. Okay, I can directly look at the code. Actually, let me show you first how it looks. So if I reload, I mean, here it looks trivial, right? If I add a track, this still works in the same way. But now, if I try to play music and I don't have the music, it will display a section where I can either drop files, or if I click here, right, which is the reason I want to edit my own videos, right? Where is it? Music samples. Okay, I will be able to upload music, okay? And I can put one of those files there and it will be uploaded. Well, maybe I might as well do it. Oh, come on. Why does it open my downloads every time? Music samples. I can upload a song and it will be uploaded and confirm that the upload works, and give me a link for removing the file if I wish. So how does this work? Okay, let's look at the JavaScript underneath these. So this is pretty prototypical, by the way, of how plugins work, okay? So what I did at the beginning is something like this. Okay, at the beginning I needed to declare the loading of the plugin. The plugin is called the drop zone and comes with its own JavaScript. It also comes with some of its own styling, okay? So I include here the JavaScript, but I think I have another place which I don't remember. Maybe I put it into the layout in which I include its own CSS, okay? So then I do the following. Let's look later at this function. Here in the code, and this is documented, by the way, if you go to the Dropzone site, you can Google Dropzone, and if you can go on the site, it's not that I came out of my own, you know, brain somehow. It's clearly documented, the code that you have to include in order to use the Dropzone plugin, okay? So one thing that you have to do is that you have to define the region of web page where the Dropzone plugin will be active, so where you can drop files in practice, okay? Via styling, via CSS, you can decide how wide and how high it will be, but you have to create a div with some stuff in it. And so the div, it needs to have an uploader, a particular ID, so that when I use the JavaScript, I can tell, hey, Dropzone, look for the ID with look for the div with this particular ID and call it yours and use it, you know, to manage the upload, and and this is also other stuff that they specify, you know, for the content of the div in the drop zone documentation. Okay. The other thing that I do is this. This crazy way of calling, of including some code in this dollar that evaluates a function, etc., is the same trick, if you recall, that I do at the bottom here, except that I wrote jQuery instead of dollar, but it's the same. This is a way to ask jQuery to please execute these lines only after the rest of the page is rendered, right? And so I'm telling essentially this. Drop zone, if I define only one per page, drop zone is you know, the class defined by the drop zone plugin, and I can say drop zone options file uploader, and I can specify a bunch of options there. They're documented in the drop zone you know, description, and so I can say what is the maximum file size, where should they go, and whether I should add remove links, and so on and so forth. Now let me a moment go here. I just want to show you a slightly later version that I like a little bit better. Okay. Okay. So this produce upload URL is a function that I wrote. For URL, you can specify both a function and or a URL, and this will return the proper URL each time. So let me now confront one of the nasty parts and complexities of using these plugins. We have essentially two different beasts in the same cage. One is Vue. Vue will have its own app, right? Is this app variable that we define, and it has its own target div, which is the place where Vue will put its own output, which is below this in the page. So in the page there is going to be this drop zone uploader, and then there is the Vue div. Okay, one below the other. Okay. Now, great. So the drop zone plugin cannot live, or in general, plugins cannot live inside the div code, inside the Vue code. They need to live outside of it. So the simple trick I'm using now is to put it on top. This is somewhat of a nasty thing, and I do not know in general what a beautiful solution is. One beautiful solution that you can use is that nothing forces you to have only one Vue controller on a page. You can have a Vue controller that controls the top of the page, then some plugin, then some Vue controller that controls the bottom of the page. But essentially, it's like having two foreign countries that want to divide the territory of your web page. You know, they don't want to collaborate with each other really. Vue wants to have its own territory, and the plugins want to have their own territory. So this is one limitation to using Vue, and I think to some extent it's a limitation of many of these frameworks because they need to know where to put their output. Okay. Now. Okay. So. The other problem is this: because this code lives in another place, it's not part of Vue itself. It needs to talk to Vue as if it has to go through a custom office in some way. And so you see, for example, when I wanted to get the upload URL, I need to refer to app.upload URL, where this app is the app created by the Vue JavaScript. And here we will see later, but you know, if I want to call a function when a file is removed, this is again straight from the definition from the this is straight from the documentation of Vue.js of drop zone, sorry, that you can define a dzone removed file function. I need to call a function via app.delete uploaded tracks. Okay, so I need to do that kind of sort of separate addressing. Okay, so let's see how it works. So the sorry, I'm trying to find the okay. So sorry, there is a bit of complicated code, and I'm wondering a bit how to explain it at the beginning. So it works in this way. Suppose you click to play a track. What happens when you do this? The method I called it select track. So this is what happens when I click on a track. What does this do? Oh, and I found a bug because I should clear this upload area really. In that case, that's a bug. Okay, I will have to fix it at some point. But let me maybe start from a fresh page so that it's easier to show you without the bug. Okay, so if I click here, I select the page. What is the problem of using the drop zone as uploader? The drop zone as uploader will upload something and tell me the file name. But here I need to know a little bit more information. I need to know that I'm uploading a track for ABC, right? I'm gonna upload an MP3 file to be associated with that particular song. Okay, maybe let's do it a little bit clearer. For example, let me see at a song that so let me go just to make it more evident. Okay, so I have some songs by IU. This is K-pop. I don't know, Zez, for example. Sorry if I mispronounce it, okay? So imagine that I created that song by saying add track. The artist is IU, the album is Boch, Italian for I don't know, and the track is called Zez, okay? So suppose I create these. Now, when I click here, okay, and when I go there, the problem is this, that the server needs to know three things. I mean, it needs to have the content of the MP3, it needs to have the file name if it wants it. I don't know why, but it's, you know, maybe good to know. But then it needs to know related to which music track I am uploading this song, right? So the drop zone was invented by its original people with the idea of uploading many files to the same URL. The URL is receiving the file name, and this works very well if you have to upload a bunch of photographs, for example, or may work well, no? Because the photos, everyone has their own file name, and if you are uploading all to the same place, you know, that's done. But our use case here is a little bit more sophisticated, right? We are not uploading these MP3s into the same generic pot. We need to upload one MP3 for each one of these tracks. So when I upload a file, I need to somehow tell the server about the ID of the track for which I'm providing the MP3. This is the whole difficulty. So how do I deal with that difficulty? I deal it by doing this. Select track is called when I click on a track to select it. Okay, so when here I press on one of these music buttons, this is called selecting a track, okay, and I call select track. What do? I do a bunch of things. First of all, there is some boring thing, right? So I deselect other tracks and I select the current track. I also say that the selected URL is equal to track.track URL. This instruction is used in order to be able to play music. What I want to do, and I haven't done yet, but I'm preparing for that, is that I want every song here to have a particularly encoded URL. So that this ZZ, when I will have it and I will be able to play it, will have a URL that will be a secret string particular to me only, so that you cannot play my songs, for instance, okay? And And otherwise, if I don't have the music, the URL is going to be null in JavaScript, indicating that the song is not there and you should be able to upload it, okay? So this bunch of code takes care of that. Then this bunch of code is done to show the uploader if I don't have the URL, okay? And I will tell you in a moment how this instruction works. I want to tell you a little bit later, because bear with me. And then I want to set the upload URL to be equal to the upload URL and a parameter that tells me that the track ID is equal to the track.id. So here I'm essentially building by hand an upload URL that has the right form. Okay? What is the upload URL? What is the basis of the upload URL? The basis of the upload URL is this. Okay, so the basis of the upload URL is a signed URL. It will look like something like this. Let me give you an example in. Sorry if this is tedious or complicated, but there is no other way. The upload URL will be done in this way. There is API, upload track, and here there is user signature is equal to true, and so it will say signature is equal to, and there will be a bit of a random string, right? So I'm taking this URL and I'm concatenating to it an ampersand sign, because the question mark is already there, and track ID is equal to, I don't know, 5. This will be the form of my URL. Okay? Now, there is only a nasty problem that is, I get caught into it every time, and I'm sure so will you. If you just say user signature is equal to true, what actually Web2Py tries to do is that it tries to sign your whole URL, which includes this portion and this portion. So if you sign a URL, normally, Web2Py tries to see the whole URL and add a signature to it. And on the receiving end, it will strip only the signature and check that the signature computed from everything but the signature is equal to the signature itself, if you understand, right? So I cannot simply add a question mark with a track ID to the end of it and hope that the signature will still work. I have to essentially tell Web2Py, be less aggressive, sign the URL, but only up to the point before the question mark, because this portion here will be added after the signature happens. It's a very tedious part, okay, but I don't know how to do it. So you see that I say hash variables is equal to false. This part here tells to Web2Py to please not to be obnoxious and just sign the main part of the URL, but not the parameters that come after the question mark. Otherwise, Web2Py will try to sign everything and verify the signature of everything, which doesn't work for us, okay? So in the corresponding code for uploading a track, when I say require signature, I will also have to say hash variables is equal to false, okay? Now you may wonder, hey, why didn't you have to do it for a lot of other methods? For example, we have delete music, and here I can simply require the signature. What's the difference between the two? Okay? The difference is this. When you do a post, as in delete track, these variables here, in a post, they are not passed as part of the URL. They are passed as part of the payload of the post. So even if you sign the whole URL, the presence of variables doesn't break anything. Okay? But if you start tinkering yourself with the URL, as I do in this method, okay? If I start tinkering myself with the URL, as in select track, where is it? Here. Here I'm tinkering with the URL, and if you do this, then you need to ask Web2Py not to sign the part including the variables. Okay? I don't know if this is clear. It's a bit boring, I know, but so essentially the problem is this, that I need to generate this dynamic URL for the uploader, because the URL needs to contain not only the destination endpoint, but this additional information of what is the track ID for which I'm uploading. Okay? So let me go back to the code. Okay, so so that's why I have this URL produce a URL. The rest of the things here, I think we will look at them later. Okay, what I do here, I want to comment on it later. I want to show you the server code for accepting an uploaded file. It's quite easy, actually. Well, almost. Uploads the file related to a track. So this is the endpoint that will receive the file on the server. What is our job on the server? To store it. Where do I want to store it? That's a real problem. So here I'm doing something really bad, okay, just to show you how to solve the problem quickly. And the bad thing that I'm doing is the following. I define a table called the track data, okay, which has a track ID field that is a reference to the ID of the track. So the tracks themselves will live in a separate database table. You will wonder, why did I do it this way and why did not I put them in the general table? I don't know why I did it this way, okay, but it's a fine implementation, or it's a possible implementation. So this track ID refers to the ID of the general track. Then I want to store the original file name. Then I want to store a data blob, which is the actual track. And then I want to store the MIME type to remember whether this is an application MP3 or whatever it was that was uploaded. Okay, so this is actually a fairly common thing, you know, to have special tables that hold the uploaded stuff. You don't usually mix. It's not a super great idea sometimes to put fields that are as large as data blob in a table, in the track table, because it could slow down access to the track table when you just want the tracks and not to play them. Okay, the idea is that on the track table you may do a lot of searches, so it's better if the table itself is small. These tracks are really big, so I'm storing them in a separate table. In truth, even storing them in a database table is a really horrible idea. Okay, the thing you should try to do is store them somewhere else. Where is that somewhere else? It depends. If you want to do it yourself, then a key value database that can expand to very large sizes, such as, you know, Cassandra, is a good option. If you don't want to do it yourself, which would be sort of my recommendation, then you should use either Amazon S3 or Google Cloud Storage, which are cloud-managed services in which you can throw, you know, you can upload blobs, you can upload essentially files, and then you can have URLs for those files. And that's a much superior way, because you remove from yourself, you know, if you manage it yourself, then eventually you have to expand the disk size you are using, which is a nasty thing to have to do, right? Much better give the problem to someone else. And if you look at the pricing of Amazon and Google, is quite competitive. You know, they're competing against each other and against others. And so you wouldn't be doing incredibly better by actually rolling out your own storage solution, you know. So Amazon S3 and Google Cloud Storage have become incredibly competitive. And they have all kinds of optimizations that would be very hard to do yourself. For example, you can set the storage kind of a kind that if you haven't accessed it in a while, your content is moved to slower storage, you know, where it costs you less. Anyway, fine, we will talk about it later. Suffice that for the time being, because I want to do everything in Web2Py and give you an example, I will be having this separate track data table in which I'm storing the information. So now the point is, I'm receiving a file, and I want to insert it by creating a new track data record for the new thing that you have uploaded. Okay, so how do I do that? I do it as follows. Here it's me logging the signature just because I was going mad trying to debug my error, right? But it's not needed anymore. So what I do is this. The first thing I get is I get the track ID out of the URL. So it's a request variable, right? So I can say request vars.trackid and I get it, and I cast it to an integer, because notice that when stuff arrives in a URL, Web2Py doesn't really know if it's supposed to be an integer or a string, so everything is a string at the beginning, right? So I cast it here to an integer. Then I log it because I'm paranoid. And then I have to do the following. See, the problem is this: you can upload many MP3s for the same track, right? You could upload one, then another, and I don't want to waste my storage with your gazillions of MP3s that refer to the same track. So when I receive a new MP3 for a track, I want to first delete any previous MP3 I might have for that same track, and only after I did that, I want to insert the new record, right? So what I'm gonna do is this: I'm gonna first delete anything from the track data that refers to the same track ID. And then I'm going to, okay, so I check a little bit that that the type is the type is an audio file and whatever else. And then I actually inserted the track by saying the track ID is my track ID. The original file name is request vars file name. So file name. So file is an object. Web2Py is kind enough again that when a file is uploaded, it builds a file object for you that has a couple of attributes. One is the file name. Another one is the type that you see two lines down. And another one is a method read that if you call it, it reads the value and returns it to you as a string. Okay? Otherwise, the file, you can stream it, so you can read it piece by piece based on need. But in this case, we don't want to do that. We want to read it all and put it all. Is horrible code, I have to tell you, right? Because we are reading an object of various megabytes, and we are just putting in the database in a single shot. Not the prettiest thing to do, but it works. Okay? And then I return OK. Now, several things are missing in this code, which gives me a little bit of cold feeling. For example, I don't check here that the track actually belongs to you. Notice that I don't do it because in this particular application, I don't have the notion of who is the owner of a track. So I'm just accepting the post on faith that it is correct, because there is only one user. I don't keep track of who's who. But normally, in a better implementation of these, what you would have to do is this. When you give me a track for a particular song, I have the track ID and I also have your cookie. So I should look up the track first in the track table, not in the track data table. In the track table that contains the metadata, I should check that the track belongs to the currently logged in user, and only in that case delete and overwrite the track. Okay? So here I'm skipping that layer of security, but it should be there. So the general rule is this: unless you know better for some special reason, you can never trust a request that comes from the browser, because you don't know whether it has been forged or what happened to it, right? Otherwise, imagine the attack that could happen. For example, there is Scott that has his music, okay? And me who have the ads for my product, and they produce MP3 that contain advertisement, right? Then what can I do? I know, in fact, I may not know which tracks Scott owns, but I know that my track is track number 17. So track number 15 must belong to somebody else. I don't know whom actually, right? But I can very easily forge a URL here that has a track ID of 15. Because the track ID is actually not part of the signature, so that part can be forged. If I am logged in, I can create a URL that will upload to track 15. And if you don't check the ownership, here I will be overwriting with my advertisement other people's data. Okay? So the rule is, when you accept something that comes from outside, always check everything possible. Never trust anything. You cannot trust it generally. Okay? So here I trust it just because I don't even have a notion of user. So, if you are signed in and you have a signature, I'm okay with it. But that's not the general way to do it. Okay? And so I write the file and I reply, okay. That's all I do. Okay? So clear so far. Now, there are a couple of nasty parts that I need to take care of, and I just show them to you a moment. And then I comment on next time more if needed. That are these ones. So So what happens if I upload a file? Let me do it. So suppose I go here, okay, I upload this Z file, okay, and then I say, well, I want to upload another file, and so I upload the glasses on top, right? So what happens? You see, it's kind of the right behavior that happens. And if I delete it, it seems to have deleted it. So how do I make that work? That behavior is implemented here. So we will see in general that this construct, this on something in quotes and then a function, this is called an event handler, and it's one of the things we will be using more often in JavaScript. I want to pick up from here next time and develop it more, but essentially you have so far seen the click event that is generated by somebody clicking the mouse. That's one event. But JavaScript uses events as a general notification mechanism. So when you when a file addition terminates, you know, when the file upload terminates, Dropzone is kind enough to raise an event. And you can catch this event and do something. Events, you know, imagine like somebody poking you, right? That's a general idea. They're used both when the user is poking the browser via a mouse or something like that, but they're also used when internal stuff happens. So if you go in the documentation of Dropzone, you find a description of all the events it can generate. It generates a bunch of events when a file upload begins, when it finishes, when this, when that, you know, you find lots of them. And so by adding behavior to those events, you can generate a more sophisticated implementation. So what I've done is this. I've said that when a file is added to the Dropzone, this event is generated whenever a new file is added. And the file can be added either by me selecting it or by me dragging and dropping it. But when a new file is known, what do I want to do? Well, in the case of songs, it makes sense to have only one file per song, right? I don't want to have two. So if you add a file, I do this. Oh, sorry, my code is not being shown. When I add a file, I say, if I have more than one file, I call this method that removes the file number 0, which is the first file that was there before. This, you may complain, is an incomplete implementation, because it means when you drop another file on this uploader, I remove the preceding one from the uploader, but I don't delete it on the server. So you may complain that I'm not doing the right thing, right? And perhaps I'm being a little bit sloppy, but I don't think it's a big damage that I'm doing, because remember that when the file upload will terminate and the second file is to be inserted in the database, before inserting it, I will actually delete the previous one. So server side, I ensure that there is no more than one file per song, right? So here, essentially, this takes care, this remove file takes care essentially only of the visual representation of the uploader, okay? Instead, when you remove a file, so you remove a file means that you know, you upload a file. This is gonna choke all my database, and then you click on this link. When you click on the link to remove the file, what happens is that you call this delete uploaded track method. Okay, and you can look at the implementation of it, and the delete uploaded track method simply does a post to a delete file URL in which it specifies which track ID is being deleted. How do I know which track ID it is? Well, because it's the selected track that is being deleted, right? And I have it set up when you chose it via the loudspeaker. Okay? So, what I will want to pick up from here next time and talk a bit more about the interaction between this Dropzone plugin and the rest of the code. And the next thing we will have to do is also how to stream the music back. So we know how to upload it up, and we need to figure out how to stream it down.